Try that again. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, mate.
Perfect. You're going well. I was reminded of the power of weed growth a couple of weeks ago when I was watching a TV program, and it featured Fukushima over in Japan after the tsunami and the subsequent damage to the nuclear plant. And all human life was taken out of there. All human endeavours were taken out of there. And what do you think is growing all over the roads, all over the buildings, in the cracks in the sidewalk and the road? Is the thing we detest most now these days is weeds. Weeds, plant out of place? Absolutely. But in Fukushima, without human intervention, the weeds were taking over the show. So, the WeedSmart Big Six. I have much pleasure in announcing that after quite a few collaboration efforts, the summer WeedSmart Big Six is hereby released. You are the first to see these brochures up here, particularly pertaining to the northern region for our weed control. The big six principles of weed control that we should all have in our back pocket, in the glove box, and adopt in our farming practices up here. Because otherwise your farm could end up like Fukushima. Weeds everywhere and you won't be able to control them unless you're going to pull them out one by one. So, Lisa Mayer, Head of WeedSmart, I have much pleasure in announcing that the WeedSmart Big Six, the Summer Big Six, is now released. First time here in Emerald for the northern region, and we've had some pretty good collaboration on this for different people, and Michael Witterick's here in the audience somewhere. He's my co-pilot, just there. Michael Witterick, Jeff Worth, Susan Mass, who's a local from this area, all had an input into this WeedSmart Big Six for the summer region. So that's something to hold into your pocket, because that's what I'm going to be talking about today. The Big Six principles of WeedSmart. Six principles. Now we've got some good speakers here today to talk about weeds, not just herbicides, all right? It's going to be practical means that you can do on your farm, practical methods that you can even control weeds that are not herbicide resistant. So, and one of them is diverse rotation. So the diverse rotations, we started years ago, didn't we, really, with our summer and winter cropping systems. We have the winter crop, and of course years ago, as I explained to Michael yesterday, in the Western Downs we used to do, you know, chop down the brigalow trees, knock them over, oats, 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 wheat, 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 and then you go back into buffle. And of course those people who decided they wanted to keep growing wheat on wheat, on wheat, on wheat, what do you reckon we had? Crown rot. So diversity is a part of our DNA, isn't it? Because we need to, because of the soil diseases that we might get in our crops, the build-up of different diseases in the soil which may affect those crops more and more, a la like crown rot, a la like sorghum, macrophamina, charcoal rot. We've got plenty of that in these days. So diverse rotations is part of our system, but also diverse rotations gives us a handle on those doggone weeds, doesn't it? It allows us to use different croppings and different herbicides in the past to be able to do that cropping that we want to do. So we can't let our weeds wag the tail of the dog. We need to use the weeds so we can get over the top of them so we can plant what we want to plant. I think I'll have another go at that. We need to plant the crops that we want to plant rather than let the weeds dictate what we do. If you've got a mass of black oats and wheat $600 a tonne and sorghum's 180, and we've got Group A resistance everywhere in chickpeas for black oats and in wheat and barley, what are you going to do? So, weed control is important. And of course, with the way the rainfall stretches out, some of our rotations, diverse rotations, sometimes they fall in a heap, don't they? Sometimes they don't quite marry up because we gear up to put on to plant some wheat. So we put on some glean or whatever, or we might have some IMI barley or IMI wheat. We put on a whole heap of flame, and it doesn't work out because it doesn't rain. So we still need to keep our diverse rotations, but of course that residual herbicide, which Spacky's going to talk about very soon, is a key to the future, and is it friend or foe? And of course we use diverse rotations to drive that weed seed bank down, don't we? These seeds that we're trying to get over the top of, Feathertop Roads, barnyard grass, sow thistle, they've all got this ability to survive in the soil for different periods of time, haven't they? So to get over the top of them, we at least need to drive it down, drive those numbers down the soil, because as you know, if you've ever counted one, Feathertop Roads has got something like 100,000 seeds. Who wants to go around pulling them roots out by the roots? 100,000 seeds. Admittedly, the top germination might only be 40%, but it's still a big problem, isn't it? Well, here many years ago when I was Landmark branch manager, I gave Dave Walker a Christmas present. I walked out in the middle of his paddock and pulled out a flea bone. And he said, "What are you doing that for?" I said, "That's your Christmas present for this year, David." And he said, "Why?" I said, "Because this thing would have produced 100,000 seeds and it was scattered all over your paddocks." He said, "Good Christmas present. Come back and have a cup of tea." Use of rotation crops, including cereals, pulses, cotton and fallow and pasture. You notice we've got cotton in the mix. It's part of our DNA in the regional areas of central Queensland and in southern Queensland and northern New South Wales. So it features everywhere, this rotation of crops, cereals, pulses. How many years did we grow chickpeas on chickpeas when they were $800 a tonne? And gave me a lot of grey hair doing it too, thank you very much. Fallow or pasture. There are people going back to pasture. And of course, this fallow stuff here, the long fallow disorder, trying to build up that subsoil moisture, hoping the rain comes and does that for us. And of course, you get 10 or 15 mils of rain, and what comes up? A sow thistle every now and then. You know, Feathertop Roads every now and then, because you don't see them, do you? So you've got to be onto them pretty well and truly. And of course, we talk about double breaks. You know, we talk about, you had wheat might be a pillar crop, or grain sorghum might be a pillar crop, or cotton might be a pillar crop. We talk about the double break, you know, giving it a break from those particular crops, those wheat crops, those endless wheat crops, or those endless sorghum crops that we sometimes are constrained into because of the weather or the moisture we've got in the soil. And sometimes when chickpeas are $800 or $1,000 a tonne, we push the envelope, don't we? So the double break from your pillar crop can be really handy, but of course we're governed by that moisture stuff we get from the sky. Short rotations, double cropping, we love that, bang bang. But of course you've got to be careful of your herbicides, haven't you? And then you've got to consider what weeds you're going to be tackling in that short rotation. What weeds am I going to be handling, and what weeds can I handle with knockdowns and be successful? And if you've got a large number of weeds coming up in that short fallow, and you've got a crop that's going to be sensitive to the herbicides you need to use, so it all comes back to those weeds, doesn't it? Getting on top of them, keeping those numbers down in that seed bank. This is what the cotton industry adapted there as their principle. Mix and rotate herbicides, and Tony Lockery from in Moree, Amps and Moree, is going to be talking about mixing and rotating herbicides. I'm not going to talk too much about that because Tony Lockery's had a heap of experience as well, in right from horticultural days right to southern Queensland and northern New South Wales. An excellent fellow, and I commend Tony's presentation to you to listen up. He's good value. Grow a competitive grain crop. Peter Newman from Geraldton, Western Australia, was one of our colleagues over there. As Lisa said, he's been on this competitive crops. His favourite subject. Every time we get on the hookup, he talks about competitive grain crops, competitive grain crops. And he's right. He's absolutely dead set right. Because I've got some photos coming up, and we've got Michael Widerick's work from Hermitage too that shows us that growing a competitive grain crop can reduce those weed seeds being produced. So without you doing anything with herbicides, you can reduce the number of seeds being produced on those plants. That's handy. But of course, if they're producing 100,000, there's 40% germination, that's 40,000 seeds from one plant. You've still got a fair few to worry about, haven't you? So if you can bring it down to 10 or 15,000, that's a better idea. And I've got some graphs there to show that too. So competitive grain crops, row spacings, plants per square metre, a good strike, a capable strike, a strong strike, has a lot of ability on those weeds in those first 4 to 6 weeks of being in the paddock. And if you can catch your crop over the top of those weeds then, with a combination of tactics, it's a good start because they won't produce the seeds. Seed bank is everything. And look, this is what I mean by competitive crop. Sorghum plants every now and then. And these monsters here, that's barnyard grass. Now if anyone wants to count them, there's probably about 30,000 seeds on those fellas there. They're not the big ones. They're some of the more ordinary ones. But that's what I'm talking about, a competitive crop. And I know we have problems with our planters sometimes. I know we have problems that seeds block up and all that stuff. But you've got to try and minimise that, haven't you? Because that's what happens. And what's plan B here? That's got herbicide on it. That's got atrazine and metolachlor on it. It got drowned after planting, more or less. It was one of my recommendations. But look, you can't do much about that. Get out there and chip them. Chipper, spot spraying, absolutely. This is a slide that Michael Widerick did and his team, his great team from DAF in Toowoomba. They did this down at Hermitage, and it was in plots down there. And of course, we're looking at ornamentalist barnyard grass. You know, seed production. So the number of seeds that one plant will produce gets to maturity. And this is mung beans. Not everyone's flavour, but when they're $1,300 a tonne this year, they might be your flavour. So we've got row spacings here. It's either 25 centimetres, 50 centimetres, 75 centimetres. And look at the number of weed seeds produced. The wider you go, this is 37,000 up here, where, if you can't see it. That's the wider rows. Can you imagine what a metre would be? This is 50 centimetres here. It's about 23,000 seeds per square metre produced. And of course 10 inches or 25 centimetres is about 16,000. Still big numbers. I don't want to go and chip 16,000 seedlings out. But look at the difference. Competitive crop, row spacing, and it figures for everything. Sow thistle, milk thistle, we know we've got plenty of resistance to that. I believe in South Australia they've got resistance to group I's. Group I's are 2,4-Ds, Tordens and all this stuff. So miserable old milk thistle's got resistance to it from our good old 2,4-Ds that was started in the 1940s. And this is chickpeas, and of course we used to call them chickweeds years ago, didn't we? Couldn't control the weeds in it for love nor money. And of course these days we've brought the row spacings back in. We've got 20 centimetres, 20 plants per square metre, 40 centimetres, 40 plants per square metre, 80 plants, and of course the row spacings, 25 and 50. Here's your 25, here's your 50. So we've increased the plant numbers per square metre, and we've reduced the row spacing. And here's sow thistle. You know, look at the seed produced, 6,000 there, and when we get out to 80, which is ridiculous, it's dropped down. But you can see the general trend. The weed seeds produced, as you increase the plant numbers, as you decrease the row spacing is so important. Crop competition, do not forget it. And if you can adapt to what you're doing, it's a great idea. Yep, our favourite, FTR, commonly known as Feathertop Roads. Isn't that wonderful, that plant? This is with mung beans. And yes, it's not as dramatic, but it's still the same thing. 75 centimetres, seed produced, what are they, 90,000? 80,000 plus? 50 centimetres and 25 centimetres. Huge effect. Good research done by the DAF team at Toowoomba. You know, gives you some correlation, some numbers to put in your brain and say, oh, McIntosh said that. I wonder if I can do that with these crops because I've got a bad problem with X, Y or Z in that paddock. I wonder if I can decrease my row spacings to give me a better emphasis on those weeds. And here's ornamentalist barnyard grass and sorghum. So once again, same old thing. You know, increasing the number of plants per square metre, and I realise that 15 plants per square metre grown sorghum is stepping very close to nervousness. But 5 to 10 and the row spacing. See the row spacing coming down? Dry weight, biomass, and guess what? The biomass on those weeds is directly correlated to seeds produced. So just don't think because it's a smaller plant it's going to have the same number of seeds. It usually won't, and this proves it here. And Feathertop Roads is exactly the same. So this is barnyard grass, reducing the seed produced numbers. Feathertop Roads is exactly the same. Same correlation. Double knock. We've heard about that, and I must confess I wasn't the most agreeable person to double knock, because you had to use that S7 dangerous poison spray seed, didn't we? But of course we had to, and I remember doing a part in the Toowoomba Chronicle many years ago where paraquat was coming under a lot of pressure because someone had used it incorrectly. And of course they came up to me and said, do we want paraquat? And I said, we have to have paraquat. I said, we just need to use it better. So we need to defend ourselves against all these application problems that we may or may have in the past and possibly in the future. But we need double knock still. Don't get carried away about it. Roundup followed by paraquat, or Roundup followed by tillage, or Roundup followed by something else. A lot of emphasis on Roundup, isn't it? We better use it right. We better not have too much herbicide resistance to Roundup because it's going to do the heavy lifting in that particular case. So your mixtures are important. Double knock, still necessary. Done right, it can still give you 100%. But of course size is the key, isn't it? Here's one episode in all our lives where size is the key. Smaller is better. Different control tactics, herbics and non-herbicides, single cohort. Tillage can be the second knock. Herbicides with a different mode of action. We all know about mode of actions. They get a bit confusing as you get out to some of those other ones, but you still need to recognise that different modes of action, mixing and rotating, as Lockers is going to talk about, is so very, very important. We need to keep our herbicides. That's why WeedSmart is sponsored by our WeedSmart partners. We still need to do all the tactics we can for our weed control so we can keep our herbicides and the new ones coming on reliable, so we can use them in the future. Otherwise, all of us are going to have a lot of chippo work, and that's not funny. Diverse tactics, robust rates, good timing, and application give 100%. Stop weed seed set. And my great claim is, but I pinched it off Scotty Campbell from Sinochem, if Scotty's here, thanks very much. If you can stop an annual plant from going to seed, you will not have herbicide resistance. If you can stop an annual plant from going to seed, you'll stop herbicide resistance. You won't have it, apart from what comes in with birds, wandering agronomists, wind, overland flow, but at least you can stop that stuff that you're growing. Stopping seed set. One of the key things for the big six WeedSmart summer practices. No survivors. Absolutely no survivors. This one here, I've got some issues with it. Croptop pre-harvest spray for desiccation. And why? Because I keep getting rung up by exporters who keep saying, hey Mac, we got a problem. We got a problem with a whole load of chickpeas going to some country that the glyphosate MRLs are too heavy, too hard, too large, too high. How can that happen? And then within the same breath he said, I don't get too worried about the chickpeas with the glyphosate in them, Mac. Worry more about the mung beans that's got haloxafop in them. We can't have any misses. We get 98.5% from the National Residue Survey that we're doing the right thing. It's that 1.5% that kills us from our overseas markets. So Croptop pre-harvest spray for desiccation, absolutely, because McIntosh said no survivors. Get those weeds before they get here. But don't push the envelope that pushes up our MRLs over the acceptable limit. And don't forget our MRLs in Australia are a lot lower, a lot higher, I should say, than the ones overseas. And that's where we're selling our mung beans. That's where we're selling our chickpeas. And that's where we'd like to sell some wheat maybe one day and our grain sorghum. So be careful of that crop pre-harvest spray or desiccation stuff, because we have MRLs that we need to stick to. And the labels need to be really rigidly adhered to. Hay production. Certainly I've seen hay production control some of our weeds before they get into seed maturity. Inter-row cultivation, boy jingos, I sat on a tractor for a long time when I was a young fella doing inter-row cultivation. You know, we know better now that we don't particularly want to do it, but gee whizzes, if you've got a bunch of weeds, that might be an option. Chipping and spot spraying, we've all probably done some of that. So better weed control all around and reduce that part would be a good idea, bonus. Harvest weed seed control. And when I came to this job with Ari back in about 4 years ago, I thought, harvest weed seed control, how are we going to use that? How are we going to use that in the north? Well, someone showed me, Peter Bates showed me, and Peter's going to be talking today on one aspect of harvest weed seed control. And it's a good one, it works. I've checked every system out of harvest weed seed control for the northern region, you know, and I've been wandering around paddocks for 40 years over this northern region. And harvest weed seed control, we can do it. It's a great method of using your header as a means of seed collection to put them in a spot where you can do something about them. Whether it's a Harrington seed destructor out the back, like a hammer mill in the back of the header, or like Peter Bates does, putting the weed seeds in the tram track. Pete's a great exponent of it. He's had great success, and I'll let him talk about that one later in the morning. So harvest weed seed control. Don't discount it because that's what they do in the West because of ryegrass. Don't do what I did all those years ago before I joined Ari. Get some knowledge about it, listen to Peter, and adopt it to your system up here. Using the header fund to catch weed seeds. That's what we're talking about with harvest weed seed control. Chaff lining, chaff tram lining, chaff carts, or weed seed impact mills. They're the terms you'll see. They're the terms you'll see in here. And I'll give you some idea of what we're talking about with harvest weed seed control in our northern region. Alphabet resistance. Anyone want to take a guess what that might be? You know how I said we got group A's to Z's, A, B, C, D? You know what alphabet resistance is? is when some plants called like ryegrass, and we're not far away from it, you know, gets 3 to 4 to 5 modes of action resistance. 3 to 4 to 5 modes of action resistance. I thought we had trouble when we had fleabane down in southern Queensland and southern New South Wales, where we can't kill one of the fleabanes because it's Roundup resistant and paraquat resistant. I thought we were having a bit of trouble. But when you get alphabet resistance, 3, 4 or 5 times of modes of action being resistant, oh boy, what are you going to do there? You cannot rely on herbicides. They're one of the tactics, but you need to employ the other ones too. Right, question time everybody. I want to know what that is. Don't all yell out at once. There's a prize, morning tea with me. And I get first chop in the morning tea. Anyone? I want you to take a good look at that. That's Feathertop Roads. FTR. Biggest pain in the bum we got. See how it's flattened on the when it comes out of the ground? And it's got those leaves with the little crinkles on, which may or may not be. That's Feathertop Roads. And guess what? I'd rather control it when it's that high, that's my pen, 1 inch high, than when it's this high. How many photos do you see of that around the ridges saying, this is Feathertop Roads? No, we always see the tall stuff flopping through the paddocks, don't we? That's Feathertop Roads. What I need all yous to do, identify Feathertop Roads when it's that size. And while you're at it, put fleabane on your list too. Okay? Feathertop Roads. Get it. That's the stage. You've got to do it twice. It's better than those big fellas trying to control them. This is the inside of the brochure we got for the summer big 6, the WeedSmart, all the different big tactics there. That should be your Bible, the other Bible. Back pocket, glove box. What am I going to do? Apart from your own mind, because here today you're going to get a whole heap of tips and tactics and things that you might want to do in the future. So when you're out scouting around your paddocks, be you a farmer or agronomist, you're going to say, whoa, have a think about this. What else can I do for my weeds besides go and drop in a heap of chemical on it that'll only get a 90% result and I won't come back to clean up the survivors? What else can I do for my weeds? This is your target. This is the WeedSmart Big 6 target. You know, rotate crops and pastures, double knock to preserve glyphosate, mix and rotate, stop weed seed set, more crop competition, harvest weed seed control. The Big 6. The Big 6 tactics. And of course, when you're getting to the bullseye here and you're doing all 6 of those, I'm going to come and buy you morning tea because you're probably going to get on top of your weeds pretty well. Bullseye, 6 principles. That's the centre part's the goal of yourselves for weeds in the future in the Central Highlands. The bullseye. Thanks everybody.